Gallipoli. This peninsula on the east of Turkey has become one of the most recognised historical sites in all of Australia. It is here that the brave Australian and New Zealand Army Corps would lay down their lives in a fierce 8-month-long campaign against the equally brave soldiers of the Ottoman Empire. Although in the end the Anzacs were forced to retreat, the Battle of Gallipoli is still considered to be a defining moment in Australia's history. It is remembered not for its results, but rather for the brave sacrifices made by each and every soldier who fought in it. For the average soldier, the conditions were beyond harsh. Every day, a soldier risked having to go over the top and charge into enemy lines, often leading to death. Certainly, the experience of each Anzac soldier would have been nothing like what they would have expected. Propaganda had been an important aspect of war for a very long time, and World War I was no exception. Citizens of Australia and New Zealand were likely exposed to wartime propaganda on a daily basis, encouraged to do their part for their country. Propaganda posters depicted the war far differently from how it actually was. In this poster, a soldier is seen happily standing over a defeated enemy. His condition looks far better than those of the actual soldiers in Gallipoli. The language used is very particularly worded to pressure citizens into enlisting, lest they let the efforts of their fellow Australian and New Zealanders go to waste. When soldiers finally did arrive at Gallipoli, they would realise that war is nothing like the propaganda said it would be. The reality was that the conditions in the trenches at Gallipoli were horrendous, almost like something out of a nightmare. During the landing of Gallipoli, Sergeant D. Moriarty describes seeing men being slaughtered like rats in a trap. But even after the trenches were dug and the Anzac troops had fortified their positions, there were still many challenges they had to face. One of the worst aspects of the Battle of Gallipoli was the food Anzac soldiers were forced to eat. The daily rations given to each Anzac soldier were highly lacking in nutrition and were far from luxurious. In his diary, Sergeant Apcar Devine describes rations for 3 days as 2 tins of bully beef, tea, sugar, biscuits, 2 cubes of bovril, also rations for the first day of landing, bully beef and biscuits. We had to arrange our packs to get all the food in, also an extra ration of water in an empty lemonade bottle. These rations were the main source of food and drinks for the Anzacs at Gallipoli. Biscuits were said to be so hard that if they weren't dipped in tea first, they could break a soldier's teeth, and the bully beef was described as being incredibly salty. Very rarely were soldiers given anything other than these basic rations to eat, and when they were, it was only something small like a single piece of bacon or 1/4 of a loaf of bread. Through Sergeant Apcar Devine's diaries, we learned that for the Allies at Gallipoli, there was a severe lack of water rations. Soldiers would likely have been incredibly thirsty throughout all the campaign, thanks to their salty meals and non-stop work. But Anzacs weren't sent into Gallipoli with just rations of food and water. There was a plethora of equipment given to each soldier to cover a variety of situations. The standard issue SMLE No. 1 Mk3 rifle and the Patton 1907 bayonet provided strong and reliable weaponry to almost every Anzac at Gallipoli. The biggest downfall of the rifle was its sights, which were poor and most certainly caused issues with the accuracy of the weapon's users. Soldiers would normally fire several shots before coming close to hitting anything. Perhaps the most terrifying part of the weapon was its bayonet, particularly what it represented. At any moment, an Anzac soldier could be ordered to prepare to leave the trench and charge straight into the enemy. This is known as going over the top. For many soldiers, this meant almost certain death. It must have been incredibly demoralizing to lose hundreds of men in a single engagement, only to gain an insignificant amount of land. Many men left Gallipoli without the mates they arrived with. Even when on the defensive, conditions were still horrific for Anzac soldiers. Artillery was fired constantly and sneak attacks weren't uncommon. During one particular attack, Ottoman forces used a constant barrage of grenades, so much so that Sergeant D. Moriarty, when discussing those they had lost in the battle, said, "You could only recognize our dead by their identity discs." These sneak attacks usually occurred at night and eventually had become so common that they were almost routine-like in their nature. The constant fear of being attacked at any time would have made sleep incredibly difficult. After an attack, soldiers would have to spend time burying their dead, which in itself must have been incredibly demoralizing. Men would have to dig the graves of their best friends, that is, if they were lucky enough to not be the one whose grave was being dug. The Battle of Gallipoli is in many ways a perfect example of the harsh lives of an average soldier in World War I. The Anzac soldiers suffered horrific experiences throughout the campaign. Many did not return home, and the ones who did would be forever left with the nightmarish memories they had accumulated over the 8 terrible months of the Gallipoli campaign.